There was a man who by every visible measure had made it. He drove a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. He wore a watch that could pay off a mortgage. He lived in a house with a gate because successful people have gates. And yet, every single month, without fail, he was broke before the 30th. Not struggling, not tight. Broke, his income was in the top 5% of his country. His net worth was effectively zero. And the most disturbing part, the part that should make you stop and think, is that he was absolutely convinced he had escaped poverty. He believed that completely. He told people that story with pride. This is not a story about a man who failed to earn money. This is a story about a man who never stopped being poor even after the money arrived. And before you feel comfortable watching someone else's mistake, I need to warn you, the mechanism that destroyed him is invisible, deeply personal, and statistically, it is already operating somewhere in your financial life right now. The question is whether you can see it. He grew up with nothing. And I don't mean that loosely. I mean the kind of nothing where you learn before you understand language. That money is fragile, that it disappears without warning, that the moment it appears, someone or something will take it. He watched his mother check prices before placing items in a shopping cart, then quietly return half of them before reaching the register. He understood shame before he understood arithmetic. That kind of childhood doesn't just shape preferences, it programs beliefs. Deep, unconscious, automatic beliefs about what money is, what it means, and what happens when you have it. Psychologists call this financial schema formation. The patterns we absorb in early life become the operating system running beneath every financial decision we make as adults. And here is the brutal truth that most financial content will never tell you. Earning more money does not update that operating system. Not automatically. Not without deliberate, uncomfortable work. He started earning well in his late 20s. A corporate job. A promotion. Then another. The money came. And the moment it did, something interesting happened. Something the behavioral economists would have predicted if anyone had been watching. He spent it. Not carelessly. Not recklessly. Purposefully. With intention. He spent it on things that signaled to everyone around him, and most importantly to himself, that the scarcity was over, that he had won, that the boy checking price tags with his mother was gone. The car, the watch, the gate, the dinners, the trips. Each purchase was, on some unconscious level, evidence, proof, a proclamation that the old story was finished. Except it wasn't, because the old story was still running the software. Here is what nobody talks about when they discuss poverty mindset. The conversation almost always focuses on scarcity, thinking the belief that there will never be enough, that spending must be controlled, that wealth feels dangerous or shameful to accumulate. And that is real. That is documented. That exists. But there is a second, far more destructive expression of the poverty mindset that almost never gets discussed. And it operates in the opposite direction. It is the compulsive, urgent, emotionally driven need to demonstrate that the poverty is over. It is status consumption as psychological medicine. And it bankrupts people who earn extraordinary money. The behavioral science behind this is fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. When human beings experience prolonged scarcity, real scarcity, the kind that creates anxiety, shame, and helplessness, the brain does not simply adapt and move on when conditions improve. The brain remains in threat response mode. It continues scanning for signs of scarcity. It continues preparing for the return of nothing. And visible wealth possessions, displays, signals temporarily deactivates that threat response. The watch on the wrist is not just a timepiece. To the nervous system of someone who grew up poor, it is a sedative. A temporary quieting of the alarm that never stops ringing. The problem is that sedatives require escalating doses to produce the same effect. And they treat the symptom while the underlying wound continues to grow. Pause for a second and honestly ask yourself, are there things you own, or things you spend money on that are less about what you want and more about what you need people to see. Comment below if that lands for you. You might be surprised how many people are thinking the same thing. He was not a foolish man. He was not irresponsible by nature. He was, by every professional standard, intelligent and capable. But intelligence does not protect you from unconscious programming. In fact, in some ways it makes it worse because intelligent people are better at constructing convincing justifications for emotionally driven decisions. The car wasn't vanity. It was a smart financial choice. Used, technically, strong residual value. He had run the number. The watch wasn't ego. It was networking. In his industry, perception mattered. You had to look like someone people trusted with serious money. The house wasn't a status display. It was an investment. Real estate always appreciates. Everyone knows that. This is what the behavioral economists call motivated reasoning. The emotional decision is made first, deep in the system, one fast and automatic and completely invisible. Then, the rational brain is recruited not to evaluate the decision, but to defend it, to construct the logical scaffolding around a conclusion that was never logical to begin with. Daniel Kahneman spent decades documenting this process. The terrifying implication of his research is not that we make irrational decisions. The terrifying implication is that we make irrational decisions while experiencing ourselves as completely rational. The story feels coherent. The logic feels sound. The justification feels genuine. And underneath all of it, the real driver fear, shame, the need to prove something to a version of the world that may no longer exist, continues operating in silence. This is the trap, and it does not require poverty to activate it. Research on lottery winners, professional athletes, musicians, and first-generation wealth earners consistently shows the same pattern. Rapid income gains without corresponding psychological evolution lead to overconsumption, identity crisis, and financial collapse at rates that should alarm all of us. Studies tracking NFL players find that within 2 years of retirement, a significant portion face serious financial distress not because they didn't earn enough, but because no amount of earning was ever going to address what was actually driving the spending. The money was never the point. The money was the medium through which an older, deeper wound was attempting to heal it. And wounds don't heal through spending. They require something entirely different. He eventually hit a wall. Not a dramatic collapse those make for cleaner stories, but reality is usually messier. His wall was a series of smaller ceilings. The raise that disappeared within 60 days. The bonus that vanished before he had time to explain where it went. The realization, quiet and devastating, that he was one bad month away from serious trouble while looking, to every person around him, like someone who had nothing to worry about. The mask had become expensive to maintain, and he was exhausted. What followed, the part of this story that actually matters, was not a financial overhaul. It was a cycle. He started working with a therapist who specialized in financial behavior, not a financial advisor, a therapist. Because the problem was never the numbers. In those sessions, something difficult and necessary happened. He began to trace the spending not to logic, but to feeling, to the specific emotional state that preceded the purchase, the anxiety before the expensive dinner, the restlessness before the upgrade, the subtle, almost imperceptible dread that accumulated when weeks passed without a visible signal of success. He began to see the pattern. And seeing the pattern was the beginning of something, not the end. Never immediately the end. Patterns this deep, formed this early, do not dissolve because you intellectually understand them. But awareness creates a gap between the impulse, and in that gap, choice becomes possible for the first time. This is what the research actually shows about breaking deeply conditioned financial behavior. It is not primarily about budgeting systems. It is not primarily about investment strategies. Those tools are useful, genuinely useful, but applied to an unexamined psychological foundation, they produce temporary results at best. Real change requires identifying the emotional function that the behavior is serving. What need is the spending actually meeting? What fear is it soothing? What story is it telling to a self that still believes the old story might be true? If you grew up in scarcity, visible success may feel not like a preference, but like a survival requirement. The brain that learned to associate poverty with danger will treat the appearance of wealth as a matter of protection, not pleasure. And no spreadsheet addresses that. No automated savings plan addresses that. Not until the belief system underneath is examined and consciously revised. If any of this is landing for you, I want to hear it. Drop a comment with the earliest money memory you can recall, good or bad. You'll start to see how many of your current financial patterns trace directly back to that moment. It's one of the more unsettling exercises in behavioral finance and also one of the most useful. Here is the deepest truth that this story reveals. Wealth is not a destination you reach when the income number changes. It is a state of relationship with money, one that requires psychological maturity that no paycheck automatically provides. You can be poor with a large income. You can be wealthy with a modest one. The difference is almost never in the arithmetic. It is almost always in the story you are still carrying about what money means, what having it says about you, and what losing it would reveal. The poverty mindset is not, at its core, a belief about scarcity. It is a belief about identity. It is the part of you that still isn't sure whether you deserve what you have, whether it's real, whether it will last, whether the person who checks prices before placing items in the cart might secretly be more true than the person standing in front of the gate. And until that question is honestly examined, not avoided, not medicated with purchases, but actually examined, the income will keep finding its way back to zero, regardless of the size of the number it started as. He drives a less impressive car now. The watch is gone. The house has no gate. And for the first time in his adult financial life, he has money at the end of the month that he consciously chose not to spend. He says it feels strange, almost uncomfortable, like something is wrong, like something should already be gone. He's learning to sit with that feeling instead of spending through it. That, more than any financial milestone he has reached, is what breaking the poverty mindset actually looks like. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want you to sit with it before scrolling away. What financial behavior are you currently justifying with logic that, if you're honest, is actually driven by something much older and much deeper?